Richard Hartford sat alone in his corner office on the 42nd floor, watching snowflakes dance past the windows like tiny ghosts. Christmas Eve had arrived, and the building stood empty except for him and the security guard downstairs. At 58 years old, he had built an empire that stretched across 3 continents, but somehow lost track of everything else that mattered along the way. His desk was clear except for a single photograph face down. He hadn't looked at it in months. It showed him with his late wife Catherine, taken 15 years ago before cancer stole her away. After she died, Richard had buried himself in work, convincing himself that success could fill the void she left behind. His phone buzzed with a message from his assistant. The charity event downtown needed a representative from the company. Richard sighed deeply, grabbed his wool coat, and headed out. Perhaps being around people would ease the hollow feeling that had settled permanently in his chest. The streets sparkled with holiday lights as his driver dropped him at the community center in the old part of town. Inside, families gathered around tables decorated with paper snowflakes and homemade ornaments. Children laughed and ran between the tables while volunteers served hot cocoa and cookies. Richard stood near the entrance, feeling utterly out of place in his expensive suit and Italian leather shoes. That's when he noticed them. 3 little girls, identical in every way, sat together at a corner table away from the chaos. They wore matching pink coats with white fur collars and had the most serious expressions on their young faces. They couldn't have been more than 5 years old. One of them was carefully writing something on a piece of paper, her small tongue peeking out in fierce concentration while her sisters watched intently. An older woman with kind eyes and silver hair approached Richard with a warm smile. "Mr. Hartford, thank you so much for coming. I'm Margaret Chen, the director here. We're honored to have you. Please call me Richard," he said, still watching the triplets with curiosity. Margaret followed his gaze and her expression softened. "Ah, those are the Parker girls. Emma, Lily, and Sophie. Their grandmother brings them here twice a week. Sweet children, very perceptive. They lost their parents in a car accident 2 years ago. Their grandmother, Rose, is raising them on a teacher's pension." Richard felt his heart constrict. Such young children facing such loss. Before he could respond, the 3 girls stood up simultaneously and walked directly toward him with purpose. They moved in perfect synchronization, which would have been amusing if their faces weren't so remarkably solemn and determined. The one in the middle, clutching the piece of paper tightly, looked up at him with large, knowing brown eyes. "Are you the sad man?" Richard blinked, completely taken aback. "Excuse me?" Grandma Rose says, "Some people look rich on the outside but feel poor on the inside," the girl on the left explained with the matter-of-fact wisdom of the very young. The 3rd girl nodded seriously. "You look like that, like you have everything but nothing at the same time." Richard didn't know whether to laugh or be offended by such brutal honesty from 5-year-olds. He knelt down slowly to their level instead, his knees protesting slightly. "That's quite an observation. What are your names?" "I'm Emma," said the one with the paper. "This is Lily and Sophie. We're triplets. We made you something," Lily added, glancing at her sister. "Because you looked lonely," Sophie whispered. Emma thrust the paper into his hands with both of hers. On it, drawn in bright crayons, were 3 little girls holding hands with a tall man in a dark coat. Above them, someone had written in careful, shaky letters, "Nobody should be alone at Christmas. You can be with us." Richard felt something crack deep inside his chest, like ice breaking after a long winter. His eyes burned with tears he hadn't shed in years. "We saw you standing by yourself looking at everyone," Sophie said softly. "That's not good on Christmas. Christmas is for being together." An elderly woman with a gentle face approached quickly, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Girls, you can't just bother people like that." "I'm so sorry, sir. They mean well, but sometimes they're too forward." "No," Richard said quickly, his voice rough and thick with emotion. "No, please, it's quite all right. More than all right." He looked at the drawing again, really looked at it. At the simple, profound kindness captured in crayon and innocent hearts. The man in the drawing was smiling, surrounded by the 3 girls. When was the last time someone had truly seen him? Not Richard Hartford, the CEO, the man who closed billion-dollar deals, but Richard, the person, the human being who hurt and felt lonely. "Thank you," he managed to say, carefully folding the drawing. "This is the most thoughtful gift I've received in more years than I care to admit." The triplets beamed at him with identical radiant smiles that transformed their serious little faces. "Would you like to help us decorate cookies?" Emma asked hopefully, reaching for his hand. "We're really good at it." "Well, I'm good at it," Lily corrected. "Emma uses too much frosting." "There's no such thing as too much frosting," Emma protested. Richard glanced at his expensive watch, then at the three expectant faces before him, so full of hope and unguarded affection. Every instinct, every habit built over years of isolation, told him to make an excuse to return to his safe, controlled, lonely world. But something in those honest young eyes, something in their simple act of kindness, made him pause and reconsider everything. "I'd like that very much," he heard himself say, and meant it completely. For the next 3 hours, Richard Hartford sat at a small table with 3 5-year-old girls, decorating cookies with more frosting than technique or skill. They told him about their favorite books, their cat named Whiskers who only had 3 legs, how they always knew what each other was thinking, and how they missed their mommy and daddy, but tried to be brave for Grandma Rose. "Don't you have family to spend Christmas with?" Lily asked innocently, licking bright green frosting off her small fingers. "I have a sister in Seattle," Richard admitted quietly. "Claire, but we haven't spoken in 3 years." 3 years? Sophie looked genuinely shocked and confused. "That's forever."
Why not?
Emma asked directly. "We had a disagreement about our mother's estate after she passed away. About money and property. Things that seemed terribly important at the time. I said things I regret. She said things that hurt. And then neither of us was willing to reach out first." Emma tilted her head, considering this with unusual seriousness for such a young child. "But she's your sister. That's more important than being right or having stuff. Family is family forever." The simple wisdom from a 5-year-old hit Richard harder than any business, advice or consultant's report he'd ever received in his entire career. Their grandmother, Rose, approached as the evening wound down and families began bundling up to leave. "Time to go, girls. Say goodbye and thank you to Mr. Hartford for spending time with you." Instead of a simple goodbye, all 3 girls wrapped their small arms around him simultaneously in a fierce, warm hug. Richard, who couldn't remember the last time he'd been hugged with such pure affection, found hot tears streaming down his weathered face. "You don't have to be alone," Emma whispered against his coat. "You can choose to be with people. It's just a choice." "Will you come back?" Lily asked, looking up at him. "We'll be here on Christmas Day helping serve dinner," Sophie added hopefully. After they left, Richard stood in the community center holding the crayon drawing like it was made of precious gold. Margaret Chen appeared beside him with understanding in her eyes. "Those girls have an unusual gift," she said softly, warmly. "They see people's hearts, not their wallets or titles. They saw you, Richard. The real you." Richard carefully folded the drawing and placed it in his jacket pocket, right over his heart where it seemed to radiate warmth. That night, instead of returning to his empty penthouse apartment with its cold modern furniture and silent rooms, Richard sat in his car and stared at his phone for 20 minutes. Then, with shaking hands, he called his sister. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice cautious and uncertain. "Claire, it's Richard," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. For everything. For being stubborn and proud and foolish. For letting years go by over things that don't matter. I've missed you terribly." There was silence, then a soft sob that turned into crying. "I've missed you too. So much, every single day." They talked until dawn broke over the city, rebuilding a bridge that should never have burned, sharing memories and tears and laughter. On Christmas morning, Richard returned to the community center with his arms full of gifts and his heart full of purpose. But more than the presents, he brought himself, not the CEO, not the businessman, just Richard, ready and willing to be part of something bigger than his corner office or his bank account. The triplets squealed with pure joy when they saw him, running over in their matching red Christmas dresses with white ribbons. "You came back!" they chorused together, crashing into him. "I learned something important from 3 very wise young ladies," Richard said, kneeling down and gathering them close. "Nobody should be alone, especially when there are people worth being with. You taught me that." He spent that entire Christmas day serving meals, playing games with children, listening to stories from elderly residents, and feeling more alive than he had in 15 years. The drawing the girls had made stayed in his pocket, a constant reminder that sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest truths. As the day ended and families departed, Richard realized the hollow feeling in his chest had been replaced with something warm and alive and growing. 3 little girls in pink coats had given him more than a drawing. They'd given him permission to be human again, to choose connection over isolation, to remember that success means absolutely nothing if you have no one to share it with. That crayon drawing hung in Richard Hartford's office for the rest of his life, and he never spent another Christmas alone. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about kindness, hope, and human connection, and leave a comment telling us about a time when a small act of kindness changed your life. Your story might inspire someone else who needs it.